When I was a teenager, I was riding in the car with some friends. The driver was speeding a little and acting like an idiot in general. We stopped so he could switch out a CD. This was in the 90s. I had a bad feeling he was going to eventually wreck the car and someone would die or get hurt badly. I almost got out of the car. I didn't though. We did end up wrecking less than 20 minutes later. I came close to severing an artery in my neck when we crashed. Everyone else's injuries were fairly minor, including the driver. His reckless actions caused the accident. I wish I would have trusted my gut instinct. The first time I met the teacher my autistic daughter was going to have in elementary school, we were chatting about my daughter, and she went over and sat in a rocking chair in the classroom, and the teacher's reaction was just over the top. She actually yelled at her, "No, no, no, that is Mrs. R's chair, little Missy." I was gobsmacked, but then I second-guessed myself, told myself that I was just being overprotective, etc. I should have listened to my gut. Mrs. R was caught pulling a neurotypical student down the hallway by his leg while he was laying on his stomach, and then she dropped his backpack on top of him. She was arrested for this, but was still able to return to work. With the addition of cameras in her classroom, while out in bond a few months later, she was caught abusing one of the autistic kids in her class multiple times, allegedly smacking him on at least one occasion with her flip-flop. After the second incident, our local newspaper shared an article they had written about this teacher many years earlier, when she was 12, and had murdered a 14-year-old classmate by stabbing her in the heart. When I was around 15, my dad was working in a different state with a friend of his for some extra income. I remember one night I woke up out of a dead sleep and everything in my body was telling me, "Call your dad now," so I did, even though it was like 2 a.m. He didn't answer. I put my phone down and was slowly starting to wake up, and tried to convince myself he was probably asleep and I was just being weird. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Something that I can't explain was begging me to keep trying, so I did. By the 5th time my stomach was so tied up in knots I thought I was going to puke. But then he picked up, and the first words out his mouth were, "Christ, honey, can you hear me?" I said yes, and told him I was worried about him, and asked if he was okay, and he said no, not really, but I need to call you back. He hung up before I could say another word, and that's when I went and woke my mom up. I told her I think something happened to Dad. My dad finally called back and told us how he and his friend gravely misjudged how sharp a turn was, and they both had just climbed back up a small ravine and were walking all over the place trying to get signal to call for help. When my call came through, they were pretty banged up, but nothing life-threatening. Only spent a couple days in the hospital before my dad decided he'd had enough and took a bus back home. My dad still talks about how, when he heard the tires leave the road and saw the tops of the trees rushing up towards the windshield, he thought they were dead, and getting to hear my voice on the phone was the most beautiful thing he's ever heard in his life. My mom still doesn't understand how I knew to call him, and neither do I. Fortunately, I've never had another experience like that again, and I don't really want to if I'm being honest. I tell my mom that whatever it was that woke me up, I hope it picks someone else next time. My mom was a crazy hippie. I moved out at 16, and was eventually able to establish a close but cautious relationship with her. At this point she was living on a boat in the Florida Keys. I loved her dearly, but she suffered from addictions and was in a relationship that was terribly abusive. I started having nightmares about her boyfriend calling me. In the dreams he would tell me she fell off the boat and they couldn't find her. My gut told me I couldn't be the one to save her. She was a grown woman making her choices. I decided to go no contact again, but I kept putting off the conversation. I'd do it after her birthday. 2 days before her birthday I got the call. She fell into the ocean while intoxicated, and her body wasn't found until the next morning. I was visiting family in California, LA area, I was walking home from a newly opened thrift store near my grandparents' house. At that time I was with my older sister, who a week or two prior had my second nephew. I started to get the feeling that at some point we were going to get hit by something. I wasn't exactly sure what, but I had that feeling. I kept pushing it off. Since around that area, and especially at that time, there may have been maybe 5 cars going down both ways of the street. We were just about to round a corner to get back onto the street by my grandparents, when I felt like I honestly needed to puke from how bad of a feeling I got. I ended up pushing my sister and my nephews away towards the wall of the house on the corner, and almost immediately I got clipped by a car that had gotten T-boned while speeding. Luckily my nephews and my sister were all right, but I needed surgery on my leg and a portion of my hip. In undergrad, my sister and I lived in a house my parents bought, and we had roommates. My sister had gotten the new guy that was moving in after summer holidays. I met him the day he moved in. I was upstairs, met him, shook his hand, went down to the basement suite, called my mom, and told her there's no way I would have let that guy move in. She asked me why, and I just said I had a bad feeling about him. He was in the house 2 months before we evicted him, for many reasons. Police had to get involved. It was messy. Fast forward a few months, and we'd got back from Christmas holidays and the house had been completely trashed. We told the cops right away we thought it was him. They said they knew him well. The insurance claim was $160,000. We lived in a hotel for 3 months while they rebuilt the house. The police genuinely thought he tried to kill us. He ended up confessing when he was in treatment, but got off due to temporary insanity caused by methamphetamines. My neighbor, who didn't leave much, always parked his car in the same spot, right in view of my bedroom window. A snowstorm was going all week, and on day 4 of the storm I was sitting in bed watching TV, looked out and saw his car had not moved all week. The snow was piled up, and the drifts were pristine. Got that icky feeling, but figured I was being paranoid. Woke up in the middle of the night to his body being carried out by EMTs. His kidneys had failed, and he was incapable of seeking help in his last few days, stuck in his house alone. Still makes me sick thinking about it. Another story was my Mel. I'm going to preface this with the fact that I watched quite a few of my family members pass. When I was age 10 and younger, I became almost numb to the idea and instead focused on the intricacies of their conditions. After all, there isn't much for a kid to do sitting in a room with a person waiting to expire. There is a smell that always stuck with me when they were close to death. Almost like a sweet rotten smell. Back to the story. One day she was talking to me, and the smell hit me like a ton of bricks. A few weeks later she was diagnosed with stage 3 mouth cancer. In middle school, my dog was barking a storm one morning in our backyard around our storage room. My parents told me to go check it out, but I had a feeling something was up, and I didn't want to be late walking to school. Shortly after I get there, the school goes into immediate lockdown with everyone sheltering in place. Apparently there was a dead body with a bullet wound found in a car at a nearby park and the suspect was still at large. Eventually the shelter in place is lifted, and the school day goes on like normal. On walking back home, as I turned the last corner with a block to go to my house, I see a whole squad of police cars pulled up around my house. I frantically sprint down the block and find my backyard swarming with police officers rummaging through all our boxes and junk from our storage room. Apparently the murder suspect was hiding out in our storage room, and was caught after someone reported seeing him jump out fence. The police were still at our house the whole day searching for the gun. If I had gone over and checked out what the dog was barking at, who knows what would have happened. The night before, my fiancée was going to leave on a road trip with her dad to go see family back east. She asked me if I was mad at her for going. I'd had a bad feeling about the whole thing, but couldn't really say why. It was just a feeling. She would have been gone for about 3 weeks. I told her it was okay, that I just didn't want to miss her. I should have listened to my gut. About 2,100 miles into their trip, at an intersection in Jalithiel, there was a drunk driver in a truck that plowed through her car and 3 others, killing her and crippling her dad. She was 29. They were about 250 miles from their destination. My world shattered on that day, and I've been a broken shell ever since. I had a bad feeling that I couldn't put my finger on. Something was wrong, and I didn't listen to my gut, and my life was completely ruined. I know that. When she was asking if I was mad at her, that she was giving me an out. If I had asked her to stay, she would have. People try to tell me that's not true, but they didn't know her like I did. She wasn't 100% sure she wanted to go. She was my best friend, my soulmate, my whole world. Yeah, it would have been selfish of me. She might have held it against me that I didn't let her go, but at least she would still be here. We were going to finally get married and start our family. When she got back, the night I got the call, something was off. I could feel that something was terribly wrong, but again, I couldn't pinpoint it. When the call came in, something made me pick up. I don't tend to answer numbers I don't recognize. She had died around the time I started feeling that way. I was supposed to protect her, to keep her safe. I failed her. It haunts me every minute of every day. It's been almost 5 years. Not me, but my nan. My nan always had this weird sixth sense about things. She always knew when someone was pregnant. She knew when her kids skipped school, when they'd snuck a treat, the best day to go to bingo, etc. She went through cancer twice in 5 years, and she had just finished her final round of chemo when she knew something was wrong. For 3 weeks she kept going back to the doctor telling them that something was wrong, but they couldn't find anything. They told her it was just her body reacting to the chemo and her age, and she'd be okay in a week or 2. She was always the happiest person I knew, but the month before her death she changed a bit. She scared the hell out of my mum multiple nights. When she'd call her in tears saying she knew she was going to die soon, I would call her at least once a fortnight to catch up, but she started calling more regularly. The last time we spoke, she said how proud she was that someone in the family was finally starting to sew. She used to be a seamstress and even made her wedding dress, but no one else had any interest until me. She also rarely would say back, quote, "I love you." But she ended the call saying how proud she was of me, how much she loved my daughter and I, and my unborn baby, and how this would be the baby to stick after 3 losses. On a Monday, the hospital did a chest x-ray, and it came up clear. Despite a 2-week-long fever that wouldn't go away, they sent her home. Wednesday my mum had to call an ambulance because she was panicking, and the fever was really high, and she said her chest hurt. Thursday, as my mum drove me home from an ultrasound appointment, my uncle called to say they did another x-ray, and it was pneumonia. 3:30 a.m. Friday morning, my nan was begging her nurses to call for my mum. She needed her there. It couldn't be anyone else. It couldn't wait. Nothing would settle her for hours. So they called, and mum went. By noon she was losing her ability to speak. By 4:30 p.m. she was gone, holding my mum and her sister's hand as my mum had backward tipped her through the tulips playing for her. When we cleaned out her house, she had 4 bunches of fake tulips and a note for each of her children, written just weeks beforehand, when she first started saying she was going to die soon.